John here, and I'm starting a new series, which is going to be my weekly commentary, called Big Data versus Smart Data. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do current events, and today I was inspired by an article on big data that said big data doesn't rule the Olympics. And it was about how predictively you would have guessed that the three-time Olympic solo canoe whitewater champion from Great Britain would have won, but he turned out, missed a gate, and got ninth, I think, or something like that. There's a huge penalty for missing a gate in the whitewater rafting. Well, it's a DQ in downhill skiing, which I used to race that, so I guess that's quite a bit worse, unless you walk back up. But you can't, I guess because you can't walk back up, they only penalize you like 25 seconds. It's enough to put you right out of the game. Anyway, so his point was that sometimes the predictive data doesn't get it right. And he didn't really get into the sample size or the variability of human decision making or the rush of the water, the bounce of the puck, as they used to say. There's a high degree of variability in a very small sample set. He didn't get into any of that, but he said sometimes business leaders are discouraged because big data doesn't always give what they expect. I thought that point was an excellent point. Tying it to the Olympics, not so sure. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that in big data versus smart data. My kids, who are all in sales and marketing, said, "Dad, you got to pass on to the next generation some of the foundational thoughts on how to work with data. The analysts now get a degree in it. Heaven help me if I would have had that. And usually like a master's or a PhD or something. Of course, one of my clients said I violated every rule of statistical analysis that they'd learned. I called up a professor at UCLA. I spent about 45 minutes with him, and he said, you don't violate the rules, you just have higher standards than most statisticians. He said, the way we teach statistics today sucks every ounce of creativity out of the students. Yeah, well, you're not going to do that to me. I'm already past that. So anyway, we're going to talk about those issues. We're going to talk about how to monetize, how to make money with data, which steps, looking back a step, is about how to make decisions with data, which, looking back another step, is about how to set up your data, how to make the right offers, how to set up the field valid experimentation, how to isolate causal variables. Almost none of that is taught today. Even by the direct marketing associations, they don't even grasp the power that they offer. So they all talk about measurement, and we'll get into that in a second. We also hope to have guest commentators. I think I have some great friends who know way more about some of these topics than I do. So I'm gonna, if I can get Google Hangouts or Skype or something so that I can switch around and videotape these things, then we will do it. And I think we're going to even have some fun and surprises. I'm going to be a little less structured than I was on my YouTube series, which I really wanted to make more educational, more on concise topics and that sort of thing. This is going to be more off the cuff, je ne sais quoi. You notice I don't have my tie on or my sport coat. It's 95 degrees outside, and I just want to get this done. Okay? So I hope you'll enjoy the vulnerability of that. I think that's such a funny word. Anyway, so off we go. Buckle up, fasten your seatbelts. So today I'm going to talk about drowning in data. It was an article that I wrote in 1995. I thought as part of this that I would show you what I looked like in 1995. So there's my picture. Oh, it's got a lot of, how about that? There's my laptop, which I actually had one Probably this might be 96 or 97. How about that guy? Anyway, you can see there's a striking resemblance to this day. There's a surprise for you. Okay, so now I want you to just think about this, right? I gave a talk in, let's say, the late 80s in Manhattan at the Hilton on 5th Avenue or Avenue of the Americas. I think it's on that whole block. Anyway, and I asked the AV people to give me some kind of big monitors, or TVs or something, that I could show what my computer was doing. Well, they'd never had anybody ask for that. Later I got a little panel out of Germany that I could put on an overhead projector so I didn't have to rely on AV people. I actually did a talk in Cincinnati where I had to make hand signals because they couldn't get the projector to connect with my computer. That used to happen a lot. I got really smart about AV. But anyway, they managed to get it done. So I had 30 or 40 people in the room. It was supposed to be a round table, but it was really packed. They didn't expect anybody would be interested in how to use computers in marketing at the DMA show, as I said, in New York City. And so I asked who was there, and someone I think from LL Bean was there, someone from Land's End, someone from More Business Products, I remember, I think somebody from IBM, but I'm not sure. But, you know, name brand companies, big companies. And they, I said, well, this is, you know, I'm just sharing what I'm doing with computers. They gave me an IBM PC that we bought from 47th Street Photo, or 47th Street Photo, and they shipped it with a bag of memory chips. They said, would you like more memory with that? I said, sure. They said, that'll be an adventure. Anyway, so here it is. It was a $5,000 piece of machinery. I'd never seen a PC before. I don't think it had a hard drive, but it might have had a small hard drive. I had a TRS-80 that I used, and that had no hard drive, just floppy. If you ever heard the term floppy disk, these things were actually flexible. They were like a piece of mylar, a thick piece of the recording tape in a cassette tape, if you've ever seen one of those. Oh, this is so funny. Anyway, so it came with this baggie of memory chips, and I opened it up and shoved these chips in, and I was sweating bullets because, you know, I didn't want to wreck a $5,000 piece of equipment. And later, I bought a computer from somewhere else and blew the motherboard. So I sent it right back, and they said, well, you've only had it a few days, so we thought we'd probably replace it. But we found a Swiss Army knife in it. And I said, well, if you replace it, you can keep the Swiss Army knife. They said, no, we think you blew the motherboard. It's not covered by warranty. Apparently, there were some, like, charred marks and things. Anyway, I'm quite the technician, as you could imagine, right? So anyway, I wrote this article for a magazine called Marketing Tools, and it also appeared in the Journal of American Demographics, I believe. I Googled it the other day, and I found that I was cited quite a number of times around the internet for this article, but I couldn't find a copy of it. So I'm going to make it available. I think you probably will have to give me your email, because I'm trying to work harder at developing my tribe, just so I'm not, in the Stone Ages, as you might expect. But anyway, I wrote it back. I don't think Marketing Tools exists anymore. I'm pretty sure the Journal of American Demographics doesn't exist anymore. What struck me as very interesting was that it required very little rewriting. Okay, that's 22 years ago or 21 years ago. How could an article from 21 years ago, how could that even be possible? How could someone write an article 21 years ago that would have anything to say about the data capabilities of today, where I understand that an airplane flying coast to coast will put up 10 terabytes of data per engine. Now, I remember in 1995 when the first 1 gigabyte hard drive came out. So it was a big deal for us because we were doing the Hudson Bay that had 15 million customers, and in a good month they would do 20 million transactions or something like that. So we were loading about 250 million transactions. Okay, so that wasn't big, but it was fully relational. I mean, it wasn't big by today's standards, but it was fully relational. And so at the conferences, they let me speak first because no one had anything close to that. And we figured out a way with Cabela's, who had a similar number of customers, but not as many transactions, to build handfuls of variables at a time. So our models were using 500 variables or 300 variables. Still to this day, most modelers are using 10, something like that. We beat them mostly. Anyway, we better go on, right? But I wanted to get my marker board working. How is this even possible, right? And the answer is the epistemology has not changed and will not change. Now, what does epistemology mean? Well, you probably already know that I have a master's degree in epistemology because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had great hockey tickets. I told my advisor. I was sitting with the girlfriends and their moms of the hockey players. And I didn't want to quit school yet. I graduated a little early. So he said, John, I'm not going to say that the quality of your hockey tickets is not a valid reason for going to graduate school, but kindly keep that off the application. Keith, he is great. Anyway, epistemology, back to epistemology. You can see how this is going to be a lot more fun, I think, than where I tried so hard to be professional. This is going to be musings of a data scientist. Okay, so the epistemology hasn't changed since we started looking at data. And I'm just doing a talk for another thing, and I went and found a picture of a catalog of Gurney Seton Nursery, and we went out there for some reason, I forget what, and we went out to their warehouse, and we were trying to explain to them RFM, which is recency, frequency, monetary. I have talks on that at YouTube. I'll put a link in if I remember. And they didn't have anything. They had a computer that they could key the orders in, and then the computer would print out a piece of paper, and they'd go pick it out of their seed warehouse, and then they'd come back, put it in a box, put one copy in the box, keep another copy, but they never did anything with it. And then they would, erase all the orders for that day. So they didn't even know who bought twice. They didn't know who bought when. They just somehow mailed all the names they had whenever they felt like it. And that was the state of things when I came into direct marketing. It was pretty loose. There were clients that I had that had addressograph labels, or they're like metal plates, and they had the reverse, the street address, the name and address reversed. And when you got a new customer, you'd have this machine that would bang, 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 bang. It looked like a little like a dog tag, if you know what that looks like. And those would feed into a machine, tunk, 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 and they would address mail that way. And then when computers started catching on, we would use the chain printers for printing what was called Cheshire labels. Probably because it was it was a euphemism for, there's another good word. It was a euphemism for label. It was green bar paper. It was pages and pages of green bar paper. And there was a machine, Cheshire label affixing machine, and it would cut the pieces of paper and glue them on as it went by. And so when we would print a catalog or a mailing, we would produce the Cheshire labels somewhere, and then we would produce the catalog out of printers, and then we would ship the produced catalogs over to the mail house, and they would glue on these labels. And so anyway, but in spite of the fact that the technology has changed dramatically, the idea of what we can learn from data, what we can and we can't learn, has not significantly changed. And that's what we're going to talk about just a little bit today. Go back over here to this. If we compare the correlation between coffee bean prices with the crime rate in New York City, we can extrapolate the net response rate and calculate the future lifetime value. We're not going to get into lifetime value today. But that's part of the article. And it was funny because I just went, I was on Freakonomics. I'm speaking on data context at Dataversity in a couple of weeks. And they had a graph, beautiful graph, that had the decline in the murder rate. You know, the decline in the murder rate correlated with the decline in the use of Internet Explorer, Microsoft's browser. That was just perfect. It was perfect. Anyway, my point in the article was, this quote was, that marketing people have this natural curiosity for what could be and what might be, and it plays into the hands of the new vendor with the new shiny object that is coming along. And so, you know, you can do a lot with Google AdWords, but I'm enjoying Twitter right now, and Facebook is adding a lot of business to business, and it's relatively inexpensive compared to the AdWords. You can just put ads up instead of trying to scarf off people's searches. And again, epistemology here it's wonderful. If you do a search on Bing, which I try never to do, but every now and then you download software and it converts over your search engine, and it makes me crazy. Mostly I use DuckDuckGo because it doesn't keep track of all this stuff. But anyway, sometimes I use Google, and every time I use Google, I have to reset that search tools, anytime, most recent year. If they really cared about me, if they really tracked me, they would know that most of the time, especially when I'm doing software searches, I don't want results from 2010 because it's not valid, or 2005 if the software's been around a while. You know, you put in your problem and you get these answers, and then you try to follow them and you don't even have the latest, you know, it's not even in the right generation. So you got to watch out for that stuff because they don't pay any attention to your search. Now Bing, on the other hand, they think they can guess what you want. So you type in Washington on Bing, see what you get. Now I know what you get on Google. On Google you'll get an article about George Washington, you'll get an article about Washington, D.C., you'll get an article about Washington State, and you might get about Washington apples. I don't know. But you'll get a variety. Why? Because Google has some humility. They know that they don't know what you're searching for. You might not know what you're searching. Half the time, I just try stuff, see what happens. But Google has deliberately decided that when there's ambiguity, rather than trying to guess from previous searches which term they think you want, which of course is frustrating because it's most likely not, instead of doing that, they'll give you the variety and portray it in a nice way. But what that does is it tells them, first of all, it gives them more information than Bing, because Bing tries to guess, and if they're wrong, they're wrong. If they're right, they're right. But they don't know what it could have been if they would have given you a variety, whereas Google does. So they actually have a hope of getting better. But the humility is really good. That's where data scientists need to learn. They need to learn from the aspect of our own inability to predict our own behavior and our own decisions. Anyway, back over to here. So, oops, clicked the wrong window. We're here. So, In the article, I have a series of 4 eternal truths. We're only going to talk about one today because it's, I'm obviously long-winded beyond words. There is never enough data to make a decision. Okay? I want you to let that sink in. Data is always historical, and decisions are always about the future. Did you hear that? Which is going to be, that's a hint on eternal truth number 2. But if you just think about that, there is an epistemological gap between the past and the future. We call it the present, but the present doesn't really exist. We better not get into that. Ask my kids. They can tell you. Time doesn't exist. The present doesn't exist. Past, future doesn't exist either. One's done, one hasn't come yet. And the present, it's gone. It's too late. So, and if you're watching this, it's amazing that we could have this conversation independent of time. Right? Anyway, back to this. So, there was an article on big data, this was about 2 years ago, and I wrote to the author because he said, we're now measuring just about everything. Everything important we're measuring. And I kind of, I wrote him back and I said, well, how do you know? There's an infinite number of variables about any event or object. Think on that. How do I know? Well, I'm really just kind of guessing. But, let's take this pen, for example. Just happens to be at hand. Okay. How far is this pen from the center of the sun? What percentage of the mass of the Earth does this pen represent? If we take a holistic picture of the Earth, including objects on the Earth. I'm not sure. What age was the designer of this pen when they designed the pen? There's a lot of questions we could ask. We could create variables about all the objects that were designed by people under 30 versus over 30. We could see if they sold better or worse. I hope this stretches your brain a little. Anyway, that guy, he's like, how could you be measuring everything? Right? You wouldn't have time to sift through it. That's one of the big problems with those jet engines. It's hard to sift through the stuff. So now they just set them up to look for, with it outside of parameter stuff. And that's kind of what I'm speaking on next month. But here's the bigger epistemological question. What you measure never tells you what you missed. Does that make sense? History's full of cases where we forgot to measure. The Spanish Armada goes out and sails against Admiral what's-his-name, Trafalgar Square, all that. Hip, hip, cheerio. Someone will write me and remind me of who. It'll come to me, I know. But the Spanish took so long to build the fleet of their armada that theory has it, if you're an oceanographer, which I aspired to be as a youth, that worms ate the hulls of the Spanish Armada while they were sitting around waiting to attack England. And so it wasn't so much about great seamanship of the British as it was about the seas basically breaking up these Spanish ships because they were worm-eaten from sitting around too long. Is it true? I don't know. It's a good theory. Anyway, but the Spanish forgot to measure the worm factor. They just loaded up the guns and they met the bloody British and they sunk. Anyway, so you'll never know what you're missing. What is lacking cannot be counted, as Solomon said in, I believe, the book of Ecclesiastes. So, one of my greatest assignments ever was General Motors Credit, and they had a database built by EDS, who told me there were 285 variables for every person in there, which I was impressed with. Did it do them any good? I don't know. But they wanted me to build a database. And the mistake I made was probably quoting it too small and saying I'd build it on a PC. I can't imagine, them wheeling a PC in and charging General Motors, like $5 million or $20 million or whatever the heck it would have been. But be that as it may, I get in this room, and I had been taking a sales course. I think Sandler's selling systems or something. And I don't know what to say. We flew in on our little twin engine, me and Ted, and we walked down these big corridors of General Motors, and we get in this little room with EDS. And I said, why am I here? That's what I learned. It's a good way to kill time if you're consulting by the hour. Well, we ran around the room, and they told us, well, you're the best thing that there is in data design and analysis and stuff. Anyway, then we got to, well, what do you want me to do? And one person said with a straight face. And one of the challenges in consulting is keeping a straight face. But they said, we'd like to know who would have bought if we wouldn't have given them the $5,000 rebate that you got from using the General Motors credit card. I said, okay, I can do that. What answer do you want? And they looked at me, and they looked at me really funny. And they said, we thought you were a data guy. I said, yes, I am. What answer would you like? They said, well, don't you have to look at the data? I said, well, my guess is that you could get in trouble if you didn't give somebody the $5,000, right? There might be somebody in there that bought without knowing about the $5,000. That would be something worth looking for. But basically, you have no data because you didn't set up a holdout test. You didn't do a field valid experimental design. So, since you have no data, really, what answer would you like? Maybe that's what cost me the assignment. Don't know. Anyway, back to this thing. So, one day I realized whether we got what we asked for or not, we still seem to need more information. Okay? Remember, this is titled Drowning in Data. I'd go into the marketing people and I'd see a big stack of green bar, maybe a couple of feet high. And I'd say, what's that? And they'd say, those are reports. Oh, okay. And what do you do with them? They'd say, well, I take them home for my kids to, crayon with. I said, well, don't you use them? No, I don't use them. The last guy came up with them. Oh, okay. And so I would ask IT people, and I'd get a little bit involved with the process, and this is what it's like. The marketing person comes bursting in and says, I need this report. I need it right now. Remember, there's not enough data to make a decision. They need this right now to make a decision. That's implied in the statement. And the IT person would say, well, okay, could you describe what you're looking for? We have this specification sheet, and they used to have pads of paper that you would have little grids on, and you could put the header and what you wanted, and which columns, and what fields and all that stuff. And so they'd hand you some of that paper, and the marketing guy would kind of scratch his head because he didn't really know what he wanted. He just wanted an answer. He didn't want a report. Anyway, so, oftentimes that would kill the project right there, or it would be 6 months before the guy would get up the courage to draw something that he thinks might answer the question. So he'd bring the thing back to the IT department and he'd say, here, this is what I need. And the IT department, okay, I see where you're going with this. Well, we're not really set up for that. And it's the end of the quarter coming up, so, we're kind of swamped with accounting reports. So we'll get back to you. And that would delay it another 6 months. And now, normally, by the time they got it back to the marketing department, they had forgotten what they'd asked for. So they would look at it puzzled and think, who knows? And that's how these piles got generated oftentimes. But I started to see, epistemologically, the other thing that would happen would be that they'd look, let's just say, in a mythical world, the IT department actually built what marketing, not what they wanted, not what they said they wanted, but what they really wanted, let's just say. And what inevitably would happen was the marketing guys would look at the report and they go, oh, look at this. And if this and that, I wonder if, and the cycle will repeat. In fact, we're in that now because we're doing a lot of reporting for a retailer. And every time we generate one, there's more questions that can be asked. And I know a lot of times IT people get very frustrated with that. But you shouldn't, because marketing is trying to predict the future, and IT is really trying to sort out the past and keep the present from blowing up. So there's a big difference in perspective between marketing and IT or accounting or whatever. And so you just have to settle for that they're never going to be happy. And once you come to that position, it'll be a much more relaxed environment for you, because you know that eternal truth number one, there's never enough data to make a decision. And they're going to have to make the decision without enough data, because that's the way decisions have to be made. It's the human condition. It's been that way since the dawn of time. And that's how we can write articles that are 21 years old and still speak to you today. It's pretty profound, isn't it? I think it is. Now let's get back to the class here. So if you think a marketing database is about data, you will make expensive mistakes when you build one. It's in the article. It's not exactly about data. In fact, it's much, much, much more about decision making. And usually it's much more about field valid experimentation, isolation of causal variables. That stuff works. You don't need a database for that. You know, we used to, every now and then we'd like forget to put a tracking code on something. And, you know, so we'd have this stack of paper. And, well, we'd just take it and split it in half, or every other one, and take a drill press, put a drill hole in the middle of it. Nobody would know what it was for. But when the orders came back with the hole in it, you knew that it was, you know, list B versus list A, or list, you know, or maybe we had a different offer. Probably we did. Take the drill press. Another thing you could do is you could take a marker, and a real juicy marker, and you could take a stack and you just go down the side, and it would bleed into the paper. Look at the things you learn in this show, right? That's awesome. Anyway, back to this thing. So simplification is essential if you want to make decisions. You basically got to face that. Marketing has to face that what they want to do is they want to create a decision-making environment rather than a data environment. And that's where we've really gone off the rails. We have gone so far off the rails. Because if all you do is collect the data, then you have no benchmarks, you have nothing. So probably as we go, I have 4 eternal truths in this article. As I said, click the link, give me your email, because I'm looking for subscribers, but I think you'll be fascinated to be one. And you'll get all 4 of the eternal truths right away. Otherwise, you'll have to wait for the 3 videos to come out, which you may want to do, and that's fine. You don't have to tell me who you are. But if you do, heck, you might learn something. Anyway, so now we're going to go John Miglosh, or you just write me. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Miglosh, you can spell that. You can find me on LinkedIn. There's just not very many Migloshes in the world. Or Twitter's fun. J.R. Miggs, I do tweet about, whatever I'm mad about, like some ref's call in the Packer game or the Olympics. I think I had a couple of tweets. I like Bubba Watson, so he's in there. But a lot of times on leadership and on growth, how to grow companies. But so Twitter's fun. I shouldn't have faded out. I'm John Miglosh. Have fun with your data. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again.